Welcome to Deborah Says Radio Show, Self-Empowerment Strategies. Deborah K. Adams, M.A., is an international #1 best-selling book author, expert on education and prevention of domestic violence and all forms of violence. Deborah says, I have lived it, I have studied it, and I have worked it. Deborah's consulting business, Self-Empowerment Strategies, SES, evolved out of working with thousands of survivors of domestic violence and other forms of violence over the past 2 decades. Experience, study and research, and practical application led to the development of the SES priorities and the 5 A's to authenticity. Experiencing violence is traumatic, and it reduces your innate ability to function at your highest level. Deborah and her guests will share their knowledge, skills, and strategies. Join them in living free of violence with joy and out loud. Here she is, Deborah K. Adams.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to Deborah Says. We are scheduled to recover our interview with my guest tonight. We had some technical difficulties on our usual time, but we've worked those out now, and so I am really excited to bring to you a wonderful woman her name is Karen Teagarden. She is the president and CEO of UniteWomen.org. She is on the boards of UniteWomen.org and UniteWomen.org Action. Her organization has both a 501c3 and C4, and so she's all about taking action. And you're going to enjoy our conversation. The Unite Women is Karen's passion, really, and it began with her passion for politics and fighting injustices. And she worked for President Obama's campaign in 2008, and she's not stopped since then. Prior to that, Karen was the president of Teagarden & Associates, a marketing sales company based in Michigan. She graduated from University of California, Berkeley. I'm jealous. I wanted to go there. And she met her husband, and they have a daughter together. So not only is she a staunch equal rights supporter, but her husband and daughter share that passion with her. Now, she is going to join us right now. Welcome, Karen.
Well, thank you, Deborah. It's great to have to be here with you, and thank you for inviting me.
Well, I'm excited because this is actually kind of a big week for UniteWomen.org, and you are celebrating a very special marker. Do you want to share that with the listeners?
Sure. Yesterday was our 2-year anniversary. We were created on social media. A friend of mine from New York and I, who we met actually on the online, working on the Obama campaign. And from that experience, we had a habit of calling one another when we were either very elated over something happening politically or were really pissed off about something happening politically. And leading up to that date on February 19th, we had some states, Virginia, for example, that had introduced the transvaginal ultrasound legislation. And then on the 18th, we had that photograph, that image of an all-male panel testifying on our behalf in front of Daryl Isa's court, as I like to put it, on our behalf on contraception of all things, and denying a young Georgetown law student, Sandra Fluke, from testifying. And so we got on the phone and we were just irate. And I said, what in the world is it going to take for people to take to the streets? I mean, this was unbelievable to us. And so she said to me, well, build it and they'll come. And then we hung up. I mean, how often do people say things like that and never do anything?
Right.
And we hung up, and I happened to look down at my Facebook page. Now, I was on Facebook, but I have to tell you, I was not proficient in social media. But I saw create a group, and I had no idea what that was going to do. But I thought, well, I'll create a group, and I'll send it to Desi, my friend in New York, and we'll post it and see what happens. And if it's just the two of us that get out on the street, that so be it. Well, the next morning we woke up and we had about 500 people who had asked to join.
Wow.
And we didn't know what to do with them at first. So I started checking out their profiles because I thought, well, I don't want some troll to get in. Well, then I realized there was no way we could do that. So we were just letting everybody in, and it was amazing to me the messages that we got, because so many of the women were thinking the same thing that we were, but most people don't stand up and do anything. And I was just an average citizen. Yes, I was politically engaged, but I'd never done anything like this before. So truly, if you have an idea, don't be scared to do it. I'm a small business owner, so I know what goes into planning out a business, and there was no thought in this. We just did it. And within that day, I realized that we needed to create state groups, and we made the decision to hold rallies in all the states, because I didn't want to do something in D.C. only because so many people can't participate, and this was about getting everybody's voices heard.
Right.
So we within a week we had about 12,000 people that had joined. We had state groups on Facebook set up, and they were already working and organizing for their state rally. And in 10 weeks, we planned 55 rallies in 45 states across the country, all on the same day.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. And I remember that situation that spurred you to action. And I felt pretty outraged by that as well. But I did not take that bull by the horn, so to speak, as you did, create a national organization for women, but also for everybody, right? The mission, why don't you share the mission of UniteWomen.org?
Sure, and I will preface it by saying that, the original goal was simply to have to get feet on the ground and then to have these rallies. And within about a week, when I started meeting all these women and men, by the way, during the week who were messaging me as they were joining, I realized that we really had hit a tipping point, and that while the rallies may have been our initial goal, this needed to continue. And that's when I started putting the plans in place to actually build an organization. Because the original idea was not to build an organization, it was just to plan rallies, and there's a huge difference. As
yes,
I learned quickly. So in about a week, we came up with the name UniteWomen.org, and because the original name was Organizing Against the War on Women, because we were organizing, and then it became to Unite Against the War on Women for the names of the rallies. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of is separate. And then I made the decision to create the organization, and I had an amazing team of people that helped me do that. And we really tried to focus on the rallies, though, for the first 10 weeks, but I was keeping a file I called my 429 file, so the day after the rallies we could really focus on now the organization. But yeah, our mission, our tagline is equality for all, mm-hmm. because let's face it, women's rights are human rights, and human rights are women's rights.
Absolutely.
Pretty much, I mean, we stand for all issues that affect women, and if you think about what that encompasses, it's almost everything. So we do a lot of work, certainly on what are considered more typical women's issues, reproductive rights, women's health care, domestic violence, rape. But we also, in addition to that, we deal with environmental issues, because let's face it, we are the keepers of our households and our families, and the environment affects us all.
It does.
So a lot of times people will ask, why are you posting about, a certain subject matter, because it's not an obvious women's issue. But if it affects women and or their family, it's a women's issue.
That's right. That is so right. I agree with you 100%, Karen. I love the equality for all. I am a big believer in what affects one human being impacts everybody else around them, right? It's kind of like that drop of water in the pond. It's not just something that happened to me. It affects everybody in my family and everybody in my friend circle and everybody in my social circle. So I think that's one of the reasons why I fell in love so quickly with UniteWomen.org. And the other part that really drew me to your organization, Karen, was I joined the Unite Women Washington Facebook group, and I saw people actually doing things, was posting through social media, but through that effort, I could see that change, I could already see that change was happening. And it's just like you shared on the Unite Women Facebook page today that 27 liberal groups oppose Obama's judicial nominee. And I know that Unite Women was one of those groups. And so it is being taken notice of. And that's what it's all about, right? For me, it's about changing social and cultural norms. And the only way you do that is by talking and then doing.
Yes, and I'm going to go back to something you said before about the drop in the water. And I often think of it, imagine what our world would be like if everyone understood interdependence.
Yes.
Because we all depend on one another and one another depends on us. So, if we would all think outside of ourselves and the effect we have on everyone else and the effect that one person can have on us, it would be such a better place to live.
Oh, it would. It would.
Yes. Yeah. But as far as the specific action that you're speaking to, yes, we have taken a stance, and as have many other organizations, not just women's organizations, against the nomination of a judicial nomination of President Obama, Michael Boggs, who's in Georgia. He was a state legislator, and he is currently, I think, on a district seat in Georgia. And based on his past votes as a state legislator and some of his decisions, he's pretty extreme in his beliefs, which is demonstrated by his votes.
Right, by his past.
Very, very much against women's rights. He actually co-sponsored a bill in the state legislature that would create a choose life license plate. Now, if that isn't bad enough, the proceeds from that choose life license plate would then go to anti-choice groups. So they would fund people who opposed choice.
Right.
So here you have people buying license plates that is a state license plate, and yet the funds would go to fund groups opposing abortion.
Yeah. Not very equitable for anybody in the state of Georgia.
He also voted for including the Confederate battle emblem as part of their state flag.
That's pretty bizarre.
Yeah, so you've got a lot of civil rights groups standing with us, and he opposes marriage equality, so you've got LGBT groups as part of the 27 groups, and I think there are going to be a lot more. There probably are a lot more groups that are standing up, but they might not be included in that letter.
Right.
And that's really important because, one group can't make a difference.
No.
I mean, I shouldn't say that. We can make a difference on our own, but it's certainly not the same as if we all stand together.
Yeah.
Because one person can make a difference. But imagine if all of those one groups or all of those one persons join efforts, the voices are just much louder.
Exactly.
So we wrote an open letter to President Obama and the U.S. Senate asking them basically to block the nomination. One might wonder why in the world President Obama would nominate such a judge, and it was because he needed, and people may be familiar with this procedure, but When the president nominates someone from your state, the two senators in those states can block the nomination before it even comes up for a vote. So the two Georgia senators were blocking some of his nominations, and he worked out a deal that if they would vote for his nominations, they could name, I think it was four candidates for these other judicial appointments, and Michael Boggs was one of them. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of a deal that his administration had made. So we really need to focus on the Senate and get them to block it.
Right.
And why is this important? I'm going to make the assumption that a lot of your listeners probably know, but I always try to speak to those people outside of that circle.
It's about education, so I think it's great.
Yeah. It's important because if you look at what we're up against now with all of the laws that are taking place across the states against our rights, against gay rights, voting rights, it's the judicial system that is going to make or break whether those laws stand. And for decades now, there have been many judges put in place that would rule in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And so we have a president who can reverse that trend, and yet he's nominating someone like Michael Boggs, and we have to make sure that it just does not happen.
Right, and it's not what's important, the health and well-being of U.S. citizens on the whole, or some backroom agreement about what I'd do on a next political move, right? I think that's one part of our political system that I have trouble with, and I know they do it to get bipartisan support on a lot of things, but it ends up hampering justice and equality in a lot of ways.
Yes, and here, this wasn't even about getting, and yes, they do in terms of bipartisan support, but this wasn't even, this didn't even have anything to do with bipartisan support. This, you've got one party that was blocking pretty much every one of his nominations for years. Yeah. And this was really about trying to move forward on some of those nominations, and the only way he could do it is make a deal with some of these Republican senators. And it's really unfortunate because in the past, when you look at the history of presidential nominations, especially judicial nominations, they pretty much went with whatever the president wanted. It was a rare occurrence if they stood up against him. Now we've got a situation where this president can't get anything through in terms of judicial nominations. Right. So, on one hand, I understand cutting deals. It's just, it really is frustrating as a citizen of this country that's the game that has to be played.
Yes, that's what I disagree with. It's a game. Yeah. And who is impacted by that game? Not the senators and the people so much voting on a partisan level so much, but I think it's been a tough few years because of that our House and our Senate cannot agree on anything, and it's just really impeded what could have been a really good, strong time of rebuilding.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me more about UniteWomen.org, and I kind of would like you to share the structure and who does the work in UniteWomen.org.
Okay. Well, when we first started creating all of these groups, and a lot of people think, we're a Facebook page and we post a lot of stuff, and we do.
We do. I agree, we do.
We do. But we're much more than that. We actually work out of about 250 different Facebook groups. If you think of each group as a floor in an office building, that might help. We all work out of our homes, on our computers. We have meetings. We either have live meetings through like Google Hangout, or we will have meetings within our working groups.
Right.
And each state has two working groups. One is more of a community group where you just share ideas and share posts and rant and rave and whatever. Then there's a separate group that is much smaller that is actually the state organizing group where they do a lot of the planning and actual physical work.
Right.
So that's 102 groups right there if you think of the 50 states and DC.
Right.
Then we have a graphics department, and we have at least, let me think. I think we have 3 different graphics groups. One for our C3, which is more of our educational, non-political type work. And then we also have one for UniteWomen.org Action, which is all of our political work. And then we actually have a separate one for our Unite Against Rape campaign.
Okay.
So we have 3 graphics groups that we work out of. We have an amazing Twitter team.
Yes, you do.
We have 2 Twitter groups. One is our working group, and one is what we call our Twitter coffee house, where people post things that it's like, hey, if you want to tweet this, isn't this interesting? Whereas the actual working group is official Unite Women Twitter campaigns. And I just have to share one effort we did, about a year ago now that I think about it, with our Twitter team. And this was when we were in Washington, a lot of us were in Washington, D.C. for the suffrage centennial celebration. And we had a little bit of downtime because while we were there, we had scheduled a lot of meetings. So we were literally sitting on the floor in our jammies on our computers, and one computer had C-SPAN live on the House floor. So we were listening to the House speeches on the VAWA vote, the Violence Against Women Act vote, in the House, and they had 2 versions that they were going to vote on. One was the Senate bill, which passed, and it was inclusive of all women.
Right.
And then the House wrote up a bill that excluded Native American women, LGBT women, immigrant women, and actually had some exclusions on campuses, college campuses.
Right.
So we were listening to the speeches, and so we had created what we call one of our Twitter bomb campaigns, and we posted that for everybody to get involved. We let other organizations know. And we started tweeting in real time to individual House members as they were speaking on the floor.
Awesome.
If they were agreeing with the Senate bill and talking about why they agreed with the bill that was inclusionary, we were cheering them on via Twitter. If they were leaning toward the House bill, we were trying to think of a nice way of putting it. We were giving them
feedback.
We're
giving them feedback.
And within and nobody knew, before we started this, nobody knew which way it was going to go.
Right.
There had already been some work. We went the day before to a press conference with Nancy Pelosi, and there had been quite an effort to get the Republicans in the House to understand why they needed to vote for the Senate bill. But people were becoming more optimistic. But it was really interesting because within a couple of hours of the beginning of our Twitter bomb campaign, we actually started getting tweets back from the individual legislators.
Wow.
Who were saying, which was the first time that had ever happened. And
right.
They were basically saying, you can stop tweeting me, I'm going to vote for the Senate bill. And the Senate bill passed. Now, I'm not saying that we made that happen, but we really got a lot of people involved, and our Twitter team is unmatched. Right? It's just amazing the work that they do.
Yeah.
So that gives an example, and we have many other groups that we work out of, but that gives you an idea of just how we're working, because I think a lot of people just see our posts and don't understand exactly what's behind all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have, in each state, we have state directors, which thank you very much. For those that don't know, Deborah is our Washington State Director.
It's an honor.
Oh, we're so thrilled to have you. I can't even begin to tell you. And then ideally in every state, and I've in talking with many leaders of other organizations, they have the same issue where not all the states are as strong as some of the other states.
Right.
But ideally, we have a legislative director, one who would actually lobby their legislators. We have a legislative research director to help with specific legislation that's happening in that state.
Right.
We have our state Twitter chicks. We have 54 different Twitter handles, one for each state, a campus handle, and a military handle.
Yeah.
And I'm missing some. Oh, an outreach director.
Mm-hmm.
So they all of them are in that organizing group working together, plus other members of the state that want to be more involved.
Right.
And then we have regional directors so that they can help. It's kind of what we call side by side or side to side communication.
Mm-hmm.
If someone in the state, specifically the state director, maybe needs help or has a question, then they can go to the regional director, and the regional director can then either answer it or knows who to go to get the answer.
Right.
So they're a critical piece in that pipeline. They're constantly moving back and forth, and they relay information to the states, and they relay information from the states, and they're also great cheerleaders. And
they are, and what I appreciate about having the regional directors as the state director is that she's there, and she moves pretty quick. You know, if you have a question, it doesn't take very long before she finds out the answer if she doesn't know it herself. And that's another thing that I love about this organization. It's very hands-on.
Yeah, we try to be hands-on, but at the same time, it's a really hard thing to manage, but to try to give the states as much autonomy as possible.
Right.
Because in an ideal world, the states really kind of run their own state in terms of what they need. Mm-hmm. They know better than we do what they need in their state, but at the same time, they have an amazing support group with their regional director and national directors and all of us. Plus, if it was just Washington State by itself without a national organization, it just doesn't. You don't have as big a voice.
No.
Many times the states will have actions that they want to do, and if they were just sharing posts within the state, it only goes so far. But we'll take that to our Facebook page, which now has over 90,000 likes and I think over 11 million in reach.
Wow, that's huge. That's huge, Karen.
And it was interesting because someone said something to me the other day, a couple of weeks ago actually, when they were very involved in the Texas action when Wendy Davis did her filibuster.
Yes.
And they were all so entrenched in what they were fighting that oftentimes you don't think outside of that. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't understand why they were up against what they were fighting. Mm-hmm. And she said it really helped her when we were posting things about what was going on in Texas on a national level, but we were also posting what was happening in Arizona, what was happening in North Carolina, what was happening in Michigan. And it made her have a much different view of what they were fighting, knowing that this was much bigger than just Texas.
Exactly.
And we're so close to it, sometimes we forget that was the intention in the beginning.
Yeah, I think that's important. You can get kind of that tunnel vision and so focused on what you're doing, but I think being aware of the bigger picture helps people understand on a different level. Mm-hmm. And that what you just said is knowing that, this is also happening in not my own state, but also 10 other states. There really is a war on women in the United States,
Right. Yeah,
it's not just one congressperson or one state legislator that we're trying to educate. It's everybody that we're trying to educate.
Yeah. No, it's been a concerted effort for decades now between. If people are not familiar with ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, mm-hmm. The Koch brothers, the Heritage Foundation, mm-hmm. there is a huge effort in terms of making a change in our judicial system, making a change at the school board level. They've been doing that for decades. They really were working up to what happened to all of us in 2010 when many of the state houses and governorships turned red, and now we're living with that. And the reason we're living with that is because a lot of people just didn't show up and vote in 2010.
Yeah.
If we don't show up in this November, it's only going to get worse, because the amount of money that is being spent on these state and local level elections, and even the federal level, their intent is to take over the Senate. Can you imagine what will happen?
You're scaring me.
Yeah, if they take over the Senate, keep the House, granted, our president can veto everything, but we're not going to have we won't make any progress.
Yeah.
At all. In fact, we just launched a campaign, because the election is obviously very important, and we just launched a campaign called The Laws of Two Nations. And the basic idea is, if you look at the House and the Senate since January 2011, and you look at all the bills that have been passed by the House that were either vetoed by President Obama, or the Senate didn't bother taking a vote because they knew it was never going to pass.
Right.
And say, okay, so let's imagine that all of those laws that were passed by the House, or all those bills rather, actually became law. What kind of a country would we be living in right now? Mm-hmm. And vice versa. If you take any of the bills that were passed in the Senate but never taken up by the House, or any of the proposals that were made by our president that were never taken up for a vote, look at the difference between those two lists. And what if those bills became law? You would have two very different countries. And the same could be said in the States.
And I mean, I think the problem with that is you have a whole lot of voices then who are silenced and not heard, and feel as if they live in a country they are not willing to be engaged in, I think. Do you agree with that, Karen?
Yes. It's understandable. I don't want to demean anyone who just throws up their hands and says, why bother? Because trust me, I've got my days.
Yeah.
Feel that way. But there is a really important reason to bother.
Yeah.
And when you look at what is happening to our rights, granted, it is going to be tough to reverse it in one election, but if we don't make a huge difference this November, it may be the point where of no return. It may just get so far out of balance that it's going to be hard to reverse it.
Right.
It's very discouraging, because one of the largest super PACs for Democrats just announced a couple of days ago that they are not going to spend any money on the midterm election, and they've made the decision that they're going to save everything for Hillary Clinton's campaign.
Oh my gosh.
First of all, we don't even know if Hillary Clinton is running. I mean, yes,
no, we don't.
She is, but we don't even know she's running. So to make a decision like that is amazing. Second, what good is Hillary Clinton in the White House if she's got a Senate and a House that isn't going to give her anything to work with?
Right.
The midterms are critical, and people do not understand that. And they have to show up this November. So we just we're in the. I wrote an anniversary piece yesterday, and my call to action, and that is, we're all really good at speaking to each other. Like-minded people, like-minded organizations. It's a comfort zone. I'm right there with everybody else. I enjoy my conversations much more with people who agree with me than people who disagree with me. But if every single person who is politically engaged reaches out to 10 people that they know are not politically engaged. And I'm not talking about going to some extreme right wing who will never agree with anything you have to say. I'm talking about people who might be Democrats people who might be liberal, people who might be moderate, people who might be independent, or just people who don't have a thought or care, who don't care.
Yeah.
And find something that you think they would be affected by, and let them know what's happening to their rights. You know, maybe it's a college student who doesn't understand what's going to happen with her right, or even his right, to birth control.
Yeah.
If it's a gay person who is not politically engaged, are aware of all of these states now that are actually passing laws that give the rights to businesses to discriminate against gays and lesbians? See, these people don't know this, and we are so close to it, we don't realize it, but the majority of people do not know any of this. So if we can find 10 people and give them one thing to make them care enough to show up in November, and then once we get through that list of 10 people, we start on another list of 10 people. And we, for those of our friends who are politically engaged, call them and ask them to do the same thing. We as an organization are going to find 10 non-political organizations that we're going to contact and ask them to engage.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think, well, what I've found is, so I do have liberal political beliefs, but I still have a lot of strong traditional and conservative values. So, and some people don't recognize that there can be a difference in that. But, you know, I believe in a strong family. Of course, I'm a survivor of domestic violence who had to separate from the father of my 4 kids. But if in a perfect world, I would have chosen to be in a 2-parent family, right? And but that doesn't mean that I can't hear other people's point of view. And on my Facebook page, I do post my political views. And sometimes I get friends who are frustrated with me that probably just turn me off. But sometimes if they respond, we can start a dialogue. I like to understand how and why people are thinking what they're thinking. And it makes me feel like I'm more educated, and then I can have the opportunity to grow my own level of knowledge, you know. So I think it's important to have the dialogue, whether you're going to agree or not. What do you think about that?
Oh, I completely agree. I do. I try to engage with people who, I guess, are open enough to have a civil conversation. There are some people I've tried to engage with where you can't. And right. There are times when you just have to say, you know what, I just need to walk away from that.
Yeah.
There will not be any changing or not even changing of mind. I mean, yes, we'd love to have that, but it just in terms of understanding, there won't even be a level of understanding when someone is so filled with hate and vitriol that they can't have a civil conversation. I've learned the hard way to give up on those conversations, but I very much enjoy my conversations with people who disagree with me, who can have a reasonably civil conversation about it.
Yeah, so that you can have the conversation, and then at some point you can agree to disagree and still have warm human feelings for each other, you know.
It's truly sad that some friendships and even some family members have split because of their stance on politics.
Yeah.
It's
yeah. So when I have family, and we have a lot of family get-togethers because I have 4 kids that are all married and 8 grandkids. So when we get together, I push the issue, and we always talk about the things that everybody says you're not supposed to talk about. You know, you're not supposed to talk about religion, you're not supposed to talk about politics. But I'm like, where else can we talk about it? We all love each other and care for each other. Where are we going to talk about it then?
Yeah.
You know, how come I can't disagree with you and you still know that I love you, you know?
Right.
Is that possible in this universe?
Well, and to tell you the truth, if we don't all speak up, it's a little hard to move forward.
Yeah.
And whether it's your political leanings or whether it's standing up for someone who is being marginalized. We have to, sometimes, you kind of sit and you watch and you're afraid to get involved, but you know what? We can't do that anymore.
We really can't. I really can't. I mean, I have family that has pretty strong conservative views that I don't agree with on guns, but I'm not going to disown them as my family member. I don't think that's worth it. The point is we still have a lot of shared history and memories and values that make us make it a meaningful relationship. So, but yeah, we should be able to hear each other without that fear of total having to separate or not be friends of. But on Facebook, it's totally optional. If you don't like my political views, you just unfriend me, right? It is a choice.
You can keep someone as a friend, but just block their posts from showing up in your news.
Exactly. But I mean, it is a choice.
Sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead, Karen.
Well, your comment about guns is probably a good example because, to tell you the truth, I could live in a world with no guns, but I do believe people have the right to own a gun.
Yes.
So I have my own personal feelings, emotions about it, but I'm also trying to be practical about it. So when I get into a conversation with someone, usually they take it to a very extreme degree that, because most people agree that there should be some form of regulations. Even members of the NRA. The NRA is no longer a membership group for its constituents. It's more an organization for companies that sell guns, gun manufacturers. So when I talk to people about guns who are really pro-gun and pro-Second Amendment, I try to point out to them that, I'm pro-Second Amendment, but your definition of the Second Amendment and what's really there, first of all, are usually two different things. Secondly, no one's trying to take away everybody's guns, because that's really where they go. They think that if we ban large capacity magazines, and bear with me, I'm not a gun person, so if I say it wrong, don't chastise me.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do it either.
47s or whatever, that it's just a path to taking everything away.
Yes.
No, it's not. And, for how many years now have they said, stock up on all your guns because Obama's going to come and get your guns? That's just not happened.
No.
And it's not going to happen.
No.
But to put in place funding for mental health issues or regulations in terms of who you sell guns to, or certain types of guns that are really, they go beyond a need for hunting or a need just to have in the home for self-defense.
Yes.
You've got gun laws now that are passing where, you can open carry in bars and airports, and it's just like, okay, that's, you're going way to one extreme because you're so afraid that something is going to happen that's never going to happen.
Right.
And if you can talk to people on a level of understanding that, A, yes, you should have your gun, and B, let's talk about what is reasonable in terms of regulations. Usually people can have that kind of a dialogue.
Yeah.
If it is, just everything is anti-Obama, then it's hard to talk to them about anything, let alone gun rights.
Exactly. I was just thinking that if people who feel so passionately about their guns, if they could translate that feeling that they have around that subject to how women feel about our reproductive rights and our rights to choice, maybe we could see where each other's coming from a little bit and be a little bit more sympathetic to that. But you're right, it's the extremist point of view that really tends to separate and isolate people and want us not to talk about it. So, yeah. I'm just one who believes in talking about everything, and my kids know that about me. And so they always warn their friends when they bring their friends over. Okay, these are things that are my mom's. You know, she'll get pretty excited if you make a feminist joke or you demean women in any way. So just don't do it, okay? And I go, I like that. You're saving me a lot of anxiety and energy. Thanks, kids.
There you go.
I'm glad you know how I feel. But I also want to talk about some of the other things that UniteWomen.org does, Karen. And one thing that I really like is your artist campaign that you have going on.
Thank you. Yeah, that was not in the original game plan.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about why we started, it certainly wasn't to promote female artists, but I was asked to speak in Salinas, California at it was a conference called Honoring Women's Rights, and they had artists, activists, and educators all together. And it was the first time I met Sandra Fluke, actually, because she was there she was actually on the educators panel, and I was on the activist panel. And it was a day I was just surrounded by, I was so entrenched in activism that it really opened my mind spending those 2 days there. Good. And meeting all of these people. And I remember walking away thinking, there must be something we could do. I mean, we're UniteWomen.org. Why can't we do something that could help these artists? Mm-hmm. And, I went away and I thought about it on and off, but, could never quite come up with the right idea. And I reached out to the woman who had invited me to speak at one point and said, we're looking to do a fundraiser. And I kind of went back to the idea of trying to help artists and, threw out an idea. And she said, that's a horrible idea. And I said, well, I don't know your world, so I don't know what works. And so she connected me with a different woman who was a curator, who's that's Karen Goodfriend. And she agreed. My idea was horrible. But we got into a discussion of what we could do. And that's when she came up. She said, I curate a lot of art shows. Why don't we should have a gallery showing, but let's make it an online gallery. And then we'll have one gallery of a live showing and produce a catalog. And so we came up with the idea of, the name of the first show was Women's Rights and Artists' Perspective. And so it was pretty broad, it was women's rights, but people could submit. And oh my gosh, the submissions we got were amazing. I didn't know what to expect, but I was so blown away at the level, the quality of the submissions. And then we selected 12 featured artists, where every month we feature an artist on our website. Mm-hmm. We also had a gallery showing last beginning of November in Maryland. And I think there were about 40 to 50 artists' pieces that were sent there, and we had a gallery showing and an opening night, and then the gallery, I think, kept it up for about a month. And then we had a catalog. So we're now working on year 2. We're going to do another one, and we actually already have the gallery lined up in New York City for our second one. And we're trying to come up with another theme. We've got a few ideas.
Yeah.
And it's been great because while there were a lot of very seasoned artists in this, there were a lot of people who had never done anything like this before. We had the submission fee very low so that a lot of people could participate.
Right. Well, I absolutely love the artist campaign, because we need to remember that we're human beings and we're whole human beings, and there is a creative side in all of us. And I think that we don't honor that very much. We focus on business and family, but we don't often honor and celebrate that side of ourselves. And I think that some of the artist work that I've seen in the catalog is very reflective of that artist's experience and vision and perspective, of course. but it's really amazing to see how they interpret that into their creative, vision. And I just think it's wonderful to unite activism and art community, because a lot of artists are very social change and social justice minded, but they just don't have a way to express it. So this type of event and campaign is I think it's pretty novel, and I really appreciate it. And I think it's a very positive thing to do, but still gets a message across, right?
Yes, thank you. And our goal was not only to give these artists exposure, but to open up art to people maybe who normally would not seek it out.
Yes.
And by doing it through social media and online, in addition to a gallery showing, there were many people who said, I never even knew this side of the art world even existed.
Yeah.
So, we were thrilled, and going to the gallery showing, many of the artists themselves showed up. So I got to meet them and talk to them about their artwork and what inspires them and what's behind the thinking that goes into what they do. And oh my gosh, it was pretty inspirational.
Yeah, I think it is. So I really appreciate that about Unite Women too. So the other thing that I wanted you to highlight a little bit was on the education piece that unitewomen.org does, and that's with your monthly task force. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, what we try to do every month, we'll take what is occurring that month, whether it's, for example, with this month, it's Black History Month. And what we're doing with Black History Month is celebrating women in Black history. And so what we've got a task force that basically will take ideas and articles and images and put them in, and this is another Facebook group we work out of, where we'll compile them, and then it's more our graphics team and our Twitter team will then take that information and determine what we'll create original graphics for and what we'll be tweeting out. And then we also, every day on our Facebook page, we post something from that task force so that we are educating people about women in Black history. And, some of them may be already known, but we try to find maybe some piece of information that's a little unique. And some, what we really love is when we can find someone that maybe nobody knows anything about, or very few people know anything about. And next month it'll be Women's History Month. In January it was human and sex trafficking.
Yes.
So every month we'll have a campaign. It's not really activism. It's just we try to put out information to educate people about that particular subject.
Definitely. It's education and awareness. And that's really what drew me to Unite Women in the first place. And I don't remember how I met Allie, my regional director, but somehow she invited me to participate in the task force in October for domestic violence, since that's kind of my big topic. And I was working for a Native American coalition at the time, so I was able to combine the two, domestic violence in tribal communities, and really focus on the disproportionate impact on Native women that domestic violence and all those forms of violence create. So that was really fun for me. That's a fun way to do education and awareness. And like I say, it's a choice if people read it or not. But if they read any of it, if they read one and they get a little bit of information, then, you've done something. And so I think that's a really positive thing that unitewomen.org does too.
Yeah, your contribution on that task force was amazing. And then we're fortunate enough, I think was it just this past weekend, where we sponsored a 2-hour radio program, a global conversation on human trafficking that you were part of. And I thought the whole panel was amazing. The diversity of knowledge about the subject matter and where people came from made it really interesting conversation. And that really came out of our effort with the task force, but also getting involved with the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking around the Super Bowl.
Yes.
And from that, that's how the idea of creating this radio program came about.
Yeah. The radio program I thought was great, and there was a lot of different experts that were working on the same topic in different ways. And I think that's what we have to convey to, the listeners, is that there's more than one way to respond to an issue or an experience, and it's good to know what's out there. So that was a great way to highlight that and bring that to the audience. So I think that was, I really love the task forces, and I can't wait for Women's History Month.
Good.
So excited about that. But how can people get involved with unitewomen.org, Karen?
Well, there are a lot of levels, and if you can't, we have a lot of disabled people who are involved with us because they can't, they think of activism as going out and protesting or going and speaking to their legislator, and we do all that, but we do a lot where if you can spend a little bit of time on your computer every week, you can help. So if they go to unitewomen.org, if they're on Facebook, go to facebook.com/unitewomen.
Mm-hmm.
Like our page, and then in the About section, you can see where your state group is. There'll be a link to ask to join your state group. So if people in Washington are listening and they want to know how to join Deborah in Washington, if they go to our Facebook page, there will be a link in the About section to every state group. They can follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is unitewomen.org. And if you have a certain discipline where you would like to apply it toward what we're doing, whether it's tweeting or you have a lot of experience in terms of graphic design, they can email us. Well, they can email me at karen.tgarden@unitewomen.org, or we have an awareness at unitewomen.org that we check every day for submissions, if people would like to do that. And you probably know better than me if I'm forgetting something.
Yeah, that's what I like. There's no fee. There's no cost to participate if you have the access to a computer. And like I say, that makes it accessible to a lot of us who may have special reasons why we can't go out, or why we can't be part of a rally, or why we can't go out and speak to people on a subject that we're very passionate about. So that's one of the things that I truly, truly appreciate about unitewomen.org. It is for everybody, including men. And I know in Unite Women Washington, we are looking for help with our legislative efforts. So I would appreciate if anybody listening wants to join us and help us in Washington State with our legislative work. That would be awesome. You can find me just about anywhere on social media. But thank you so much, Karen, and happy anniversary to unitewomen.org, and wish for many, many, many more. And I hope that the listeners heard you and they're thinking about ways that they can be politically engaged at a level that's comfortable to them, but in particular to vote in the midterm elections as well as the big popular general elections. But do you have any closing words for the listeners, Karen?
No, I think what you said is exactly right. If you've got an hour a week, you can make a difference. And we've got people who do that, and people who are doing this 24/7.
Yeah. So it's really up to any of us how much we want to be involved. And I think it will also connect you to a whole community of people which is fantastic. And you get a lot of support, and we support each other on the things we all care about. So keep that in mind, listeners. UniteWomen.org or Facebook. UniteWomen.org is how you can get in touch with Karen and, of course, me, as I'm the state director for Washington State. So thank you very much, listeners, for joining Karen Teagarden and I today. Really appreciate you hanging in there with us. And my next show next week is going to be with an organization called National Women's Coalition Against Violence and Exploitation. And we're going to have a co-founder and director, Michelle Bart, and she is going to talk about the work that NWCAVE does with missing and exploited children and people. And that includes people who are coerced into sex trafficking, as well as all types of reasons why people go missing. We are inviting families of some people that NWCAVE has already been working with to raise their voice and share their experience with the audience too. So that will be next Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time or 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, same place. So thank you so much, and everyone have a great day. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening. You can reach Deborah at DeborahKAdamsMA@gmail.com or go to her website, www.sissies.net, www.DeborahKAdamsSays.com, www.DeborahKAdamsTheMissingPiece.com. See you next Tuesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where Deborah says, and remember, you are empowered.